The anime begins by presenting the protagonist's life in his previous world, where every day he faced the same exhausting routine, going to work on an always crowded train and almost always rushing back home so as not to miss the last departure. His life went on without any changes until, suddenly, he reincarnates in another world and ends up becoming the lord of a remote village. With this new position, he begins to dream of developing that place and turning it into something better. Upon waking up, he realizes that his hand is far too small. Confused, he starts walking around the house, trying to understand what is happening. When he looks out the window, a girl appears and apologizes, calling him by the name Van. He also apologizes, explaining that he was simply admiring the scenery because he found it beautiful. The girl finds the way he speaks strange and asks how someone so young can use such complex words. Even though he is only 2 years old, Van is surprised to hear this and begins to reflect, until he realizes that he still retains all the memories of his past life. He concludes that this must be the phenomenon known as reincarnation. Little by little, Van recalls his new family and discovers that his brothers are named Mersha, Yard, and Sesta. Curious, he asks where exactly he is living. Soon after, he is taken to the dining table, where he finds his father and all his siblings gathered together. During the meal, Van receives attentive treatment from the maids and even jokes with them, thinking that this helps his image. However, while he is having fun, he clearly realizes that all the memories of his life in Japan remain intact. The father asks one of the sons to say what his plans for the day are. One of them answers, somewhat nervously, that he will study fire magic and battle tactics. Sesto comments that he intends to focus on learning magic. When it is Van's turn, he admits that he is not sure yet, but says that he would like to learn more about the culture and history of the country. The brothers are impressed by the answer, while the father starts to laugh, realizing that he has spoiled the boy quite a bit. Even at such a young age, Van shows unusual maturity. The father believes that he will inherit the qualities of both himself and his late wife, Milla, and that he will certainly awaken powerful fire magic. The father comments that he is eagerly awaiting the magic evaluation ceremony, which is held when children turn 8 years old. He has great confidence in Van's potential. The boy explains that, in that world, magical aptitude is extremely important, especially for nobles, who need to master offensive abilities to protect their territory. The 4 main elements are fire, water, wind, and earth, and anyone who awakens something different from these is seen as a source of shame. His father and brothers have affinities with the 4 elements. At another moment, Van asks whether that port is the only one available. The maid confirms it, explaining that there is a gigantic creature in the sea, which makes navigation dangerous. Van shows interest in learning more about the races of that world, surprising the girl with so much curiosity. She tells him about the existence of elves and dwarves. Some maids try to interrupt, saying that such topics are complicated for a child, but Van asks them not to worry, as he simply wants to learn. The topic then shifts to magical tools. The maid explains that certain crystals, gems, and minerals can store magical energy, allowing the creation of special items according to each person's affinity. At that moment, a man appears, slams his hand on the table, and reminds everyone that Van is only 2 years old and is still learning the basics. This man is the head butler. He tests Van by asking him to count the fingers on his hand. When the boy answers correctly, the butler is impressed and decides to become his tutor. For Van, those studies turn into a true torment. Even so, thanks to the intense lessons, he learns an enormous amount in a short time. 2 years pass, and he turns 4 years old. The scene shifts to Van training in combat with his favorite maid. Despite delivering precise strikes, she dodges them all and even mocks him, running away while laughing. Another maid appears, asking whether she is not afraid of being punished for disrespecting a noble, since that is considered a serious crime in that world. To settle the situation, Van simply gives the girl a light flick on the forehead and says that the matter is resolved. For an entire year, he trains swordsmanship every day and is already able to fight on equal footing with older children. Because he faces opponents of a similar age, the attacks end up being simple. But even so, his skill draws attention. The difference between his current life and his previous one is enormous, and everyone is impressed both by his talent and by his humility, despite coming from a noble family. While drinking water after training, Van comes across D, the vice captain of the Royal Knights Order. D asks to examine his hands and is surprised to find that they are still soft, without calluses. He had imagined that Van trained every night. The boy explains that he spends most of his time studying. D comments that Van studies far more than an ordinary child, which makes the boy understand the reason for his heavy routine. Excited, D offers to teach Van advanced swordsmanship and promises to make him the greatest swordsman in the kingdom. Van realizes that he speaks very seriously, but explains that he enjoys studying just as much as fighting and intends to devote himself to both. D agrees not to push him too hard, but makes it clear that he will be strict. He begins training him from morning until late afternoon, saying that the exercises are light. Although Van is certain that the man has no heart, a maid appears, praising the boy's effort, and Van thanks her. Despite the difficulties, he feels that his days in this new world are fun and full of meaning, something he had never experienced before. He decides to continue making the most of this new life. The following year, Van turns 6 years old and becomes known as a child prodigy. His routine, however, becomes far too heavy, filled with studies and intense training, making him feel increasingly tired. Because of this, he asks the maid to take him out for a walk. He says that he wants to go to the market just once, so that he can stop being seen as a prodigy and live like an ordinary child. Upon arriving in the city, Van is delighted, as he has never been there before. Till explains that it is the largest market in the region. Suddenly, Van sees a man accompanied by a girl in terrible condition. When he asks what is going on, he discovers that the man intends to sell his own daughter as a slave. Hearing this, Van's heart tightens, deeply shaken by the scene before his eyes. Till explains that when families do not even have the bare minimum to eat, many end up selling their own children as slaves in order to survive. Van feels a painful weight in his chest as he realizes how cruel and unjust this reality is, considering it unthinkable to do such a thing to a child. At that moment, a woman appears and asks whether he is the Marquis's son. She introduces herself as Rosalie, an employee of the Merry Merchant Company, and states that she can arrange anything he might need. Van then asks what the price of the boy in front of him is. Rosalie asks whether the child has any magical aptitude, and the man replies that he only has talent for stealing, claiming that because of that he is worth no more than 3 large silver coins. Angered, the man begins to violently assault the boy and decides to take him to another shop. Outraged by the scene, Van decides to buy the child and offers 5 large silver coins. The man immediately accepts and hastily leaves the area. Van approaches the boy, asks if he can stand, and introduces himself, saying his name is Van. The other boy reveals that his name is Cramson. Van tells him that he is free to go wherever he wants. Till is confused, as she does not understand why Van bought a slave only to free him. Van explains that he did it simply to help and asks whether Cramson has anywhere to go. He then suggests that Cramson come to his house. Cramson replies that he does not believe the Marquis would allow a child of unknown origin into the mansion, but that if he were officially a slave, the situation would be different. Van asks if that would be acceptable, and the boy agrees. Rosalie suggests that the best course of action would be to form a master-servant contract. When the pact is made, a mark appears on Cramson's hand and will remain there until it is undone. Van thanks Rosalie, leaving her extremely happy, as she had never received a sincere thank you from a noble in her entire life. The next day, Cramson informs Van that D is waiting for him. Van asks him to say that he is not there, but the boy replies that D already knows. Van then asks Cramson to put on a glove, since the mark of the contract is not something pleasant to show. Cramson, however, says that he likes showing the mark, as it represents the bond he has with Van, and that makes him very happy. Van comments that he bought new gloves for him, and the boy agrees to wear them. Upon leaving the room, Cramson tells D that Van is not present, but the man swears that he saw Van enter earlier. Cramson believes that D only imagined it, perhaps because of the intense feelings he harbors for Van. As a result, D decides to take Cramson to train in Van's place. After that, 2 years pass, and everyone comments that Van has turned 8 years old. Expectations are enormous, and everyone can hardly wait for the result of the magical aptitude test. People are excited, believing that Van will become the Lord of the Lands. He is beloved by everyone, as he always treats people with kindness and humility, as if he were an ordinary person. The scene shifts to the family residence, where it is explained that all the children of the clan master the 4 elements, and that Van would certainly also have an aptitude for fire magic. After the test is conducted, rain begins to fall, and everyone is shocked to discover that Van has no affinity with any of the 4 elements. The only magic he can use is production magic. Among all types, this is considered the most unfortunate and despised. A man explains that this magic allows the creation of weapons and accessories using available materials and imagination, without the need for elemental affinity. He questions how Van intends to protect the people with an ability considered useless. The father, frustrated, recalls that both he and Van's late mother always had great firepower and cannot understand how his son could be born so useless. Consumed by rage, the man draws his sword, determined to put an end to it, saying that he was naive to believe Van would be a genius, when in reality he has become a source of shame. At that moment, one of Van's brothers steps in front of their father and proposes an alternative. He explains that there is a remote village that has never developed due to its isolated location. He suggests that Van be sent there. The village has just over 100 inhabitants, is located to the north in a mountainous region that produces nothing of note, and is also threatened by a powerful demonic beast. Nearby lies the territory of Count Ferdinand, and on the other side is the kingdom of Uranetta. The value of that village is minimal, being used only as a support point for training expeditions. It is a recently acquired territory whose loyalty to the Marquis's family is weak. If someone from the family were to take command, even symbolically, its prestige would increase. The father then decides to leave Van in the care of the strongest man in the village, and orders that he depart as soon as everything is prepared. He then leaves the room. The brother apologizes to Van, saying that it was the only possible solution. The news spreads quickly, and everyone is saddened by the boy's departure. Many people like him, and even Dee decides to accompany him to teach him everything he knows about magic. Van asks whether a knight can really go along, but Dee assures him that there is nothing to worry about, because wherever Van goes, he will go as well. The head butler decides to retire and accompany Van, saying that he will have a lot of fun helping him. With no other option, Van accepts that everyone will go with him. Till asks if he is all right, since he seems to be smiling so much. As he leaves the city, the people are saddened but accept the decision and wish Van good luck in his new life. The boy feels happy knowing that he has so many people he can trust. Thus ends the first episode.